Greetings, X. I have returned for the third time, and possibly for my final one. I haven't received any pushback for posting here from anyone, and no threats have been made towards my life. None of the information I have posted thus far can be linked back to anyone, and the word of an anonymous poster on 4chan really holds no weight in the real world anyway. If you would like to read my previous two posts, they are both here. I say it may be my final post, as the interaction I have received has not really been worth it for me. Instead of a discussion and questions on the thread instead devolves into petty insults. Anyway, let me tell you why I have come back again. If you haven't seen my previous posts and can't be bothered to read them, then let me tell you that I am a private contractor that through a certain company is employed to work for the elites of the world for whatever job that they need to get done. I never work directly under them, and there is always a proxy. I cannot disclose specifically which elites I am involved with, or what families are involved, and I have to be very vague about the locations. I am sure you already know exactly who I am talking about when I mention the elites. I have worked for this company and doing these jobs for the past few years, and in my previous posts, I shared my story of working at an underground auction that took place in an underground building underneath New York City. I worked as a guard, and it was a human auction. The other story I shared here was about when I was contracted by an elite to punish and torture a man and gang stalk him to make his life a living hell. Now that the backstory is out of the way, I can tell you that this event took place in the last couple of weeks, and it is fresh in my mind. If I'm being honest, it kind of fucked me up pretty badly, and I am fearful of doing any more work for my company. It involves an event that our clients had to set up where they hunted some people for fun. I know that probably doesn't make much sense right now, but all will become clear soon. I will start the Greentext now. Get called in by my boss pretty late on in the evening. Sounds like it's something incredibly urgent, so I bust my ass to get over there ASAP. Seems like pretty much every person who we employ has turned up. The boss tells us that the client has contracted us for a large-scale operation for an event that had apparently been in the works for many years. Our task would be to assist the clients directly, in person, on a private island that they were going to be using for the event. Again, I cannot disclose the location of the island or who owns it specifically, but you can imagine the people who have the wealth and the power to own their own private islands. We were going to be providing security first and foremost, but then we would be there to assist with anything at all that the client would need, and that we were to do what we were asked, no questions asked. That's pretty much a given with all of these kinds of jobs, but the boss seemed to really reiterate that point. Weird, since none of the people here were new to the industry. I was one of the members with the least amount of time served, and even I had a good few years with a lot of experience at high-profile events. We were going to be shipped out tonight on a private jet that had been prepared specifically for us. Our only job on the jet was to prepare for the event. The boss also mentioned that the jet would be carrying important cargo that we had to make sure got to the island without any issues. Sounded simple enough. I just want to preface, we did get a preliminary rundown on what the event was going to be, but it wasn't until we got to the island and got an in-depth briefing that we realized just how sadistic it was going to be. We were told that the clients on the island would be holding a sort of hunting session with some friends, and that they were inviting some esteemed guests. We were told that what they were hunting was going to be unconventional, and that we would find out more when we arrived, but to be mentally prepared. We all understood. We were on the jet relaxing. There must have been maybe 10 of us in total. All of a sudden, we start to hear some sounds coming from the back of the plane. It starts as a light movement, then we hear knocking, before there are screams ringing out throughout the whole plane. A guy rushes out of the cockpit with a gun drawn and points at me and one other guy and tells us to follow. We rushed down the cabin and through the door into the cargo hold, and I could not believe my eyes. Multiple people, all tied up, gagged and bound. They were all men, and all seemed to be knocked out unconscious, except for one guy whose gag had somehow come off, and he was now screaming for his life. He was squirming all across the floor, just screaming, and not even attempting to say any words at all. The fear in his eyes was like something I had never seen before. The guy who told us to follow him goes to put the gag back on him, but the man on the floor tries to bite him and gets swiftly kicked in the face. The guy mumbles something in frustration underneath his breath and tells us to hold the guy's legs and arms to stop him from squirming so much. He pulls out a needle and injects the guy, who eventually passes back out. This was unusual, even for us. I thought that if the clients wanted to play some sick game, then the people would have already been on the island, but it looks like we were tasked with transporting them this time too. I had seen too much shit on previous jobs, and knew by this point that asking questions was the last thing that I should do. I kept quiet and just went back to my seat. We touched down on the island not too long later, and there were staff waiting to receive us and help with the transport of the players, I guess I will call them from now on. They were still out cold, so it did not take very long. We were all called in immediately for a briefing. We were told the operation in theory would not be too complex, but that we were going to be given extensive details to make sure nothing went wrong. Our clients had been setting this event up for years and had abducted what they called a fine selection of individuals who were suited for their game. They numbered about 20 in total, and they had extensive background checks, were tailed and followed for the entire year, and a fully comprehensive dossier was compiled on each and every one of them to ensure that they were the right picks. Their routine, what they ate, who their family members were, what job they had, and etc. They wanted people who would not be missed too much, or those with proclivities that will give a reasonable explanation as to why they went missing. For example, one was a gambling addict. Would anyone really be surprised if he dropped off the face of the earth one night? I mean, surely some loan sharks just finally claimed on the debt, right? The clients wanted to hunt them. They wanted to release them onto the island, and even provide them with some basic supplies to survive, and then track them across the island like they were deer, so that they could kill them. The island had undergone somewhat of a transformation to serve as a sort of battleground, like having cabins built and other things. Our job was simple. We would all be provided with earpieces, and we would be assigned to one client each. We were there to make sure that the clients didn't end up killing themselves, and that they knew where every trap on the island was set up at all times, as well as doing every single thing that they asked for, such as scouting ahead, or bringing ammunition and other supplies. The setup was mostly taken care of. We just had to put the players into place, and then the game could begin. It took a few hours for the players to wake up, but once they did, the show began immediately. We were set up atop a slight incline in a man-made bunker with a clear sightline of all of the players. Think a military bunker with a straight line gap to shoot out of. The clients were set up with all kinds of weapons, too many different ones to go into detail about. They started to wake up and immediately started freaking out. Some started screaming, some asking questions, and one shot away into a forested area before anything could happen. We had set up a big crate into the center of the clearing for all of them to notice. Most of them were wary of it and stayed far away, but one brave man took the crowbar that we had left and pried it open. They were all confused and trying to figure out who the fuck was who and where they were and why. As soon as they saw the first man pull out a rack of weapons, they all rushed towards and scrambled to pick them up. The clients wanted the game to be fun, so decided they should at least get the opportunity to fight back. On the rack were hatchets, crossbows, throwing knives, and other assorted melee weapons. They wanted them to be under the illusion that they could fight back and win, to make it more interesting, but they did not want to run the risk of any accidents happening. Most of the fuckers down there didn't look like they even had the strength to pull back a crossbow string and load it. After grabbing the weapons, they started to move away from each other quickly until we shot off a warning flare. The clients were ready for the hunting to begin. As soon as the flare went off, the players ran for cover behind the crate, with some opting to run into the forested area instead. Within seconds, the clients were letting multiple shots fly. A few of the runners made it into the forested area, but most of them had no chance at all. One by one, they were being dropped like flies. The crate was useless for cover, and the players quickly became riddled with bullets. After a minute or so, we heard a few screams, followed by a large explosion, and the clients quickly got up and told us to follow them outside of the bunker. I was armed myself, but did not have anything fancy, just an M9 Beretta and a couple of clips. Both us and the clients were wearing bulletproof vests, and we had military gear on and were carrying extra ammunition for them, and even some grenades for the clients. The clients split up to fend through the forest, and I was immediately vocal on the comm system. We had a rigorously laid out map with details of all the traps that were set, along with coordinates and other designated markers. The clients had apparently done run-throughs of the game for close to a year, and seemed to already be familiar with the layout, and so we were just a precaution. The client I was assigned to insisted on being in the lead and told me to stay silent behind him. He told me he had been waiting for this for a long time and didn't want his moment ruined by seeing me. I did not say a word and just tailed him closely. We made our way further into the forested area and encountered a poor soul who had run into a trap. The clients had mines placed at certain points throughout the island, and this unlucky fucker had run into one of the ones placed in the forested area. The man was a mess. If I wasn't on a job, I would have turned and vomited instantly. The sight was horrific, but I think the smell was the worst part. It smelled like bile that was almost palpable, like if you breathed in the air, you could feel it in your nose and in your mouth and taste it. The man was split in half. His lower body was nowhere to be seen below the abdomen. His eyes hung fully open, and the air was just like leaking out of his body, and I even saw his upper body kind of twitch for a brief second before halting again. His intestines were just hanging out loosely all over the floor. The client stopped and took a photo and chuckled to himself, and then told me to call in the casualty so that we could keep track of the number of players left. Moving deeper into the forested area, we came across another poor fucker. His leg was caught in a bear trap. He had no idea we were there, and he was trying desperately to free himself. He was trying to pry it open with all of his might while he was half sobbing and half shouting, but he couldn't get it all the way open with just his hands, so it kept slamming shut back onto his already punctured leg and causing him to scream even louder in pain. The client put his finger to his lips to tell me to be quiet, and he made a gesture telling me to stay put. He snuck up behind the man as slowly as he could and grabbed him from behind. He grabbed him by the neck and put him into a chokehold. The men instinctively tried to fight back, but every movement he made caused his leg even more pain, and it looked unbearable. It didn't take long before the pain, combined with the chokehold, was too much, and the man passed out. The client gave him a few kicks to the head before producing a Bowie knife from his person and finally finishing the job. I think around maybe 30 minutes or so had passed in total at that point, but with the adrenaline and so many things going on, it was difficult to keep track of the time. It was nearly all over, much quicker than we thought it would be. After communicating with the others on the comm system, we figured out that only 5 players were left to be hunted. They had already slaughtered 15 of them, or they had perished to the traps that were left around. The client told me to stick close by to him, and that he knew where they would be. They had fenced off large parts of the island, so that they could not stray too far. If they did somehow manage to make it over the fence, then boom, job taken care of. We moved deeper and deeper in, and must have been walking for around 5 minutes, when an arrow came flying out of nowhere and narrowly missed me. I started scanning for the person, and before I had fully noticed them, an arrow came flying again and was suddenly lodged into my thigh. It was probably the most painful shit I had ever experienced. I screamed in pain and pulled my gun up ready to shoot back, but I was told to put it the fuck down and move out of the way. The client knew where he was shooting from, a small cabin that had been set up across the way with some medical supplies to keep the players going. He went fucking crazy. The cabin was only made of some shitty thin wood, so it wasn't a problem for him. He just started hosing it down. I'm talking spraying a full fucking mag up and down and across the wood, and then he did it again after he had loaded another mag. He told me to go and check to see if the player was dead. Before I could even say anything, he told me he didn't give a fuck about the arrow and to check right now. I had already pulled the thing out and applied pressure and a bandage as best as I could, but it still hurt like fuck. I kind of half hobbled over to the cabin and kicked the door in as best as I could with my gun drawn and pointed. It took me a couple of tries, but it didn't matter in the end. The guy was more than dead. He looked like a block of Swiss cheese dyed red. It wasn't just the one man either. There had been a second one hiding inside of the cabin with him, and he had been riddled with bullets too. Once again, the client went over to the two bodies and started taking pictures and laughing. He pulled the bodies outside of the cabin by their feet, one by one, so as to bring them into better lighting for the photo. He told me that they were now added to his collection. He told me to radio in again about 2 more deaths, and I did so without hesitation. The others received the message, and they informed us that only one last player remained, and that we should meet up at their coordinates together. We made our way to them as quickly as we could, and found that they had already caught the final player. He was slumped on the floor and curled into a ball. He was beaten and bloody, but he was still alive. The clients argued for a while about whose trophy it would be, and who should be the one to give the final blow, and after a short discussion, they came to a conclusion. The clients ordered us to pick the final player up by his arms and drag him along back with us to where we first arrived. He didn't even have the energy left in himself to resist, and he did nothing but slump the entire way and let us drag him. His breathing was heavy, and he had blood trickling down his face. Once we got back, the clients wanted us to tie him up. We brought a wooden chair outside and bound his arms and legs to the chair, but did not bother to gag him. He had no energy to speak or scream. They started to perform some kind of strange ritual that I didn't really understand. One of the staff from inside the house brought out some kind of sword. I'm not really sure what kind, but it looked spotless and like it had never been used before. It was spotless and looked like it could have been ornamental. One of the clients said some words and poured out some kind of clear liquid along the sword, and he began working on the final player. I'm not sure if he was even fully there anymore. He looked like he was disassociating from the world around him and wasn't even really present anymore. Each client took a turn to say some words that I couldn't really make out, and then they made small cuts in the man. He howled every time, and it was the most haunting thing I had ever heard in my life. They kept going and going, a small cut on the thigh, one on the cheek, one on the arm, until he was bleeding from nearly everywhere. Then the final client put him out of his misery with a deep stab, and I was grateful to not have to watch the men suffer anymore. Seeing things like this so often, becoming desensitized to it, it never really fully works. No matter how much you see it, or experience it, it still messes up your brain every time. It's not something that human minds have evolved to deal with. After that, we had to collect the bodies, or what little was left of them, from around the island in order to fully dispose of them and clean the place up for whatever event they would be hosting next. No one said a single word to each other, and we were rewarded with a crazy sum of money as a bonus for our discretion. I have done some truly awful shit in my life, X, but the more I post here and think about these things, the more I question going back. It's like my brain is begging for me to get out, but I know that I am in for life at this point. I try my best to just not think, because it never does me any good. Anyway, that is enough sulking. I hope you don't judge me too harshly, X, and I pray that God might find some way to forgive me. I might not post here again. I might not do a job again. Or maybe it's just the booze talking, and I'll be back to normal again tomorrow. Anyway, thank you for reading. Between ages 13 to 15, hanging out with a friend when we noticed that his basement has absolutely no windows. Blackest pitch black I've ever seen when you turn off the lights and close the door. We decide to make a game out of it. Sit on the top step with the door shut and the lights off. First person to chicken out and either flip the light switch on or open the door loses. We are lasting a while the first time. I notice something at the far end of the basement. A pair of red lights next to each other. Then see they're moving slightly. Point them out to friend. He sees them too. That round ends in a draw as we both yank that door open and jet back upstairs. Rationalize the lights. Probably just some kind of machinery. There was a furnace down there and probably some other stuff that would have red lights. Round 2. Notice the lights straight away this time. Point them out to friend. They are very close to where the furnace is, but not quite in the exact spot. Eyes adjust slightly to the near perfect darkness. Fucking humanoid shape in the dark around the lights. It's like a cloaked person, hunched over with glowing red eyes. Again, looks like it is occasionally shifting from side to side, as if uncomfortable, sitting in one place for too long. Otherwise doing nothing whatsoever. Well, I lost this round. Back up into the light and the safety. We rationalize some more. This time it's some kind of machine and a pile of clothes or a stain on the wall. Try for round 3. Again, we see the red lights and the gently shifting humanoid shape. I'm not making any aggressive moves, so we just stare it down for probably 15 minutes or so. Neither of us are backing down this time, so we agree to a draw, turn on the main lights, and finally go to investigate the eyes. We check the wall where we saw them. Jack shit. There is a single shelf bolted to the wall and holding a single bottle of paraffin wax and nothing else. Nothing round-shaped, nothing red, and nothing illuminated. Way too chicken shit to investigate with the lights off. I'd been reading X for several years at this point, and I knew what comes from antagonizing shit you don't understand. We eventually arbitrarily decide that it was the ghost of his dead hamster, whose cage was stored elsewhere in that same basement. Be me, 16 or 17 years old. Go camping with friends for a week. On the 4th day, we stop at an abandoned quarry. Arrange 2 tents. We cook some pasta, sing a little, pray and say goodnight. Ground is hard, but we are very tired from the long walk, and I fall asleep after a little while. Suddenly wake up in the middle of the night. Realize there's something different, but still don't know what. What's that? .jpg. A constant noise disturbs my sleep, as if there was someone walking on the gravel-sprinkled ground at 10 or 20 meters. Creepy as fuck, but I suppose it's one of my friends who had to pee. Get back to sleep. Like an hour later, I wake up again. The annoying sound still moving nearby. Get back to sleep. Wake up again. Steps are closer. Okay, that is weird. Damn, it's like somebody is walking just beyond the thin veil of our tents. The one friend in my tent still sleeping. Hope it's just a harmless wild animal. Not sure if I should open the tent to see what's outside. The sound of a zip echoes in the quarry from the place we left our bags at. Nope. This pattern of waking and sleeping goes on the whole night until the sun comes up. Steps still going on, closer than ever. I am paralyzed, won't even breathe in case that catches the attention of whatever is out there. Out of nowhere, the tent bends right over me, as if something hit it. Nope, I am fucked. Nothing happens. Get back to sleep one last time. When I wake up, the steps are gone. Ask friends if they heard anything tonight. Lol, no and on. What you talking about? 8 years later, I am still creeped out whenever I hear the sound of steps on gravel. B15. Mom is going out of town for a week, leaving me alone. Fuck yeah. First day is fine. First night I have a fucked up dream. Only part of the dream I remember is at the very end. Strange girl, incredibly skinny, pale as death, hair like grease. Starts snapping her head/neck and limbs in strange directions. Lets out a scream akin to the thing. Scream wakes me up. Can still hear it for a few seconds after I wake up. Shake it off as a bad dream. Go to make my breakfast. Keep seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye. Finish making breakfast. Go to take it back to room. Glance down the hallway while walking to room. The girl is just standing in the far corner of my mom's room. Snaps her neck up and stares at me. Nope out. Get into room. Slam door behind me. Lock that shit up. Sit in chair shaking for 30 minutes. Calm down eventually. Decide it was just my head playing tricks on me. Finish eating and take plate to kitchen. On the way to kitchen, can't see mom's room. On the way back, have to look. She is on the other side of mom's room now, closer to the door. Fucking points at me with backwards arm, elbow facing upwards. Dive into bedroom. That was no mind trick. Grab rifle. Aim it at the door for what feels like an hour. Nothing bursts in. Decide it's safe enough to go back to browsing the internet with my rifle next to me. Do this for the rest of the day until it is late at night and I can no longer suppress the hunger. Bring rifle with me to kitchen. Make a fine-ass dinner. On my way back, I see her again. She is in the doorway of my mom's room now, standing watching her because I feel like hot shit with my rifle. Look her over. Arms are both backwards. Right leg is entirely backwards. Left leg jutting out at a weird angle. This angers her, apparently. She snaps her jaw down, lets out the exact same scream from a dream. Starts dragging herself along towards me. Morale check, 0%. Jump into room again. Same procedure as before. Finish dinner in my room. Thinking over my situation. Pretty obvious I can't call anyone and rant about a spooky ghost girl in my house. Decide the only thing I can do is try to face it head on. In the morning, try to stay up through the night. Eventually fall asleep in my computer chair. Have the exact same dream again. When she screams, I wake up again. The doorknob in my room is jiggling back and forth. Thank Jesus I locked it. Aim rifle at the door. Jiggling stops. By now I'm entirely losing it. I think I'm going to die. Luckily she doesn't try anything else, and I just spend the rest of the night online again. Spend my time thinking over what I'm going to do when I face her. Live in a city, so I can't exactly shoot at her unless I absolutely have to. Decide the best thing to do is try to hit her with a bayonet on the end of my rifle. The dawn comes. It is time. Fix the bayonet. Charge out of the room and down hallway, trying not to shit myself. Charge all the way into my mom's room. She is not there anymore. I look all over my mom's room, trying to find her. Nowhere to be found. Start heading back down the hallway to my room. She is in front of my fucking door. Decide to stick with my original plan. I charge. I run right through her, and I feel nothing but cold. Run directly into my room, and fall flat on the floor from all of the momentum. Look behind me to see what is happening. She turns slowly towards me, starts walking into my room. Kick my door closed on her. She turns into a cloud of fog. Lay where I am for a while, just thinking. It is clear I cannot hurt her. It's also clear I don't want her to do whatever the fuck it is she's trying to do with me. Decide the best thing I can do is stay in my room until my mom comes home. Luckily I was weird and had emergency supplies of food in my room. It turns into a siege for the rest of the week. I can't leave my room. Every time I fall asleep, I have the same crazy dream. Every time I wake up to her fucking with my door. As time goes on, it gets more and more aggressive. Eventually it goes from jiggling the doorknob to slamming into the door with a loud bang. By the 6th day, I've almost completely lost it. No sleep and constant stress make me insane. 6th night. I know I have just a few more hours until mom comes home, and I will be saved. The thought relaxes me. I start fading and fall asleep. Have the same dream. Wake up at the same point. This time something is different. No slamming on my door. Dead silence for a few seconds, then suddenly there is a crash of breaking glass. Sounds like it was from my mom's room. Realize this is actually happening and not in my head. Grab rifle and run out into the hallway. Can't see shit because it is so late. Suddenly a shadow figure runs out of my mom's room and into the cone of light coming from my room. Hear the scream again. I've completely lost it by this point. Bang, bang, bang. Shadow figure drops to the floor. I fumble with and eventually turn on the hallway light. There's a knife on the floor. The shadow figure I saw was a human. Big pool of blood around him. Between this and the 6-day siege, my mind shuts off entirely. I pass out in the doorway to my room. Wake up to someone shaking me. It's a cop. The neighbors had called when they heard shooting. I tell the cops what happened that night, omitting the previous 6 days. The man I had shot was a known felon who had been breaking into homes to steal things. Mom comes home. Cops explain what happened. Everything fine. I'm okay, etc., etc., etc. After that night, never again see the girl or have that dream.